A poor man was brought into a rural hospital among the vast Asian steppes. The man was unconscious, so the doctors had to undress him themselves. When the patient's pants were removed, he peed himself, and the nurse giggled a bit in embarrassment. Her reaction, however, was actually caused by another thing going on with the patient. It turned out that he was in a state of sexual arousal. The man spent several days unconscious, after which he eventually regained consciousness. He had a headache, but was otherwise healthy. In this small village, about a third of the population understood perfectly what the poor man had experienced. They themselves had experienced the same long sleep and its consequences. And the wives of the local men knew that immediately after waking up, the latter would greatly desire intimacy, and would, in fact, be in such a state for at least another month. The children in the village were not spared either. They constantly dreamt of winged horses or snakes as they slept. Even a local cat named Marquis fell victim. It went mad and began to throw itself at the walls and furniture and scream like crazy. The pet tormented its owners until late at night, and when they managed to get it out into the hallway, it attacked the dog. In the morning, the cat fell asleep, snoring as loud as a grown man. Having come to its senses by the evening, it couldn't even jump onto a chair from the sheer lack of strength left in it. One might make a joke about some zombie apocalypse going on, but the people of the Kalachi village in Kazakhstan would not appreciate such a joke. Between 2013 and 2015, this remote settlement 300 miles away from the capital was plagued by a mysterious disease. People suddenly began to fall asleep for several days on end. The mystery of the Kazakh sleeping sickness is still being solved. Lyubov Belkova, a resident of Kalachi, was most likely the first victim of this mysterious illness back in 2010. The woman was trading in the market as usual when she felt strangely sleepy. She woke up already in the hospital. It turned out that 4 days had passed and she even had suffered a stroke. Beginning 2013, a powerful sleep plague came over the village, having struck a quarter of the population there. In the end, the mysterious disease became a local epidemic, having been transferred to 152 people out of 647 of the local residents. At least that's how many were registered during the 2009 census. The unknown disease had very strange symptoms. People fell asleep anywhere and at any time, so Kalachi was nicknamed Sleepy Hollow. Sometimes patients seemed to be conscious and even walked, but then they suddenly turned off, falling asleep for several days. Some went into this forced sleep for 6 whole days. Others fell ill twice. Such a fate befell a local resident named Viktor Kazakh. This man and his wife had gone over to the city. On August 28th, it was warm, so the couple decided to ride a motorcycle rather than go by car, which Kazakh was extremely happy about. However, he fell asleep right at the wheel and woke up in the hospital on September 2nd. Naturally, the couple crashed along with the out-of-control vehicle, but Victor was glad that they had chosen the bike that day. The consequences of a car accident could have been much worse, both for him and his wife, along with the vehicle itself. Upon waking up, Victor's blood pressure began to rise for no reason. Headaches tormented him for 6 weeks to such a harsh degree, he had no idea what to do with himself. Although he never said anything about changes in sexual activity. All the victims of the sleeping sickness suffered from migraines. Some also experienced severe dizziness and nausea, memory lapses, and horrific hallucinations. The disease affected only the village of Kalachi, but it turned out to be so mysterious that the capital's doctors began to study it. Soon the situation was under the close supervision by the Prime Minister and the country's president. The government created a special commission to oversee the study of the sleeping sickness. More than 20,000 laboratory and clinical trials were conducted over 6 months. They checked everything, to include the air, soil, water, food, animals, building materials, and even the Kalachi residents' addictions. They tried to blame alcohol for the appearance of the sleeping sickness. Researchers suggested that the locals might have been abusing alcohol, and during that period of time they came across low-quality booze. But the hypothesis failed to withstand any scrutiny. What's more, it's highly unlikely that the inhabitants of Kalachi gave alcohol to their own children and the cat Marquis. Patients were examined in the best metropolitan institutions. Doctors and scientists tested and rejected dozens of hypotheses, finding no answer. The Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan turned to the international medical community for support. There was even information that American specialists from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention were sent to Kalachi. Granted, there was no official confirmation of these rumors. Scientists had to check all possible causes, but the locals immediately named the culprit with confidence. It turned out to be a uranium mine. The ghost village of Krasnogorsky is neighbor to the border of Kalachi. Back in the days of the Soviet Union, it was a mining settlement. Workers mined uranium for nuclear weapons and nuclear power plants in a nearby mine. In the 1990s, it was closed, or rather abandoned. Among the ruins of the once busy high-rise buildings, only a few families stayed back to continue living there. The mine, unattended, began to fill with groundwater and collapse. Still, it seems strange that not a single family from Krasnogorsk suffered from the sleeping sickness. There is no such data from the times when the uranium mine was functioning. Nevertheless, uranium is no small deal. The connection seems logical enough, and the first suspects were radiation and radon gas. The researchers who arrived at the village immediately checked the radiation levels and at the same time the presence of radon, carbon monoxide, and the salts of heavy metals. The detected amount of radon did turn out to be somewhat increased, but it was not enough to create problems of this magnitude. And more importantly, radon poisoning causes other symptoms. Radiation was also written off as a suspect. And yet, the uranium mine wasn't that easily forgotten. It was actually recognized as a source of another harmful substance, but it was not clear which one. Then scientists found their answer: carbon monoxide. This has since become the official explanation for the occurrence of sleeping sickness. The Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan made a statement to the press. He referenced researchers who confirmed this fact, although things were all a bit different. In several houses in Kalachi, the level of carbon monoxide exceeded the norm by 10 times. This was confirmed by Sergei Lukashenko, director of the National Nuclear Center Institute for Radiation Security. Russian scientist Leonid Rykvanov agreed with this explanation. He believed the gas had escaped from an abandoned mine and poisoned the village. Damage to the body by carbon monoxide had a lot in common with the sleeping sickness. Carbon monoxide molecules bind to blood 200 times stronger than oxygen molecules. The brain is deprived of the necessary element and begins to turn off. There leads to lethargy, nausea, and vomiting, as well as dizziness and loss of consciousness. Everything seemed to fit, but Duke University Medical Center pulmonologist Claude Piantadosi had his doubts. Yes, the symptoms are similar, but carbon monoxide poisoning is different. He criticized the official explanation behind the sleeping sickness and the opinion of other experts. Various gases are a big problem in mines, but carbon monoxide is released during combustion, and there was no fire at the old uranium mine. Questions also arose from specialists in mining safety. Gas easily fills closed spaces, however the village was a different matter. A large amount of gas would have had to escape from the mine, reach the village in a dangerous concentration, all without dispersing in the open air. Furthermore, the villagers fell asleep not only at home, but also in the market, driving a motorcycle, or milking a cow. Then the scientists noticed another nuance. Carbon monoxide poisoning is easily detected with a blood test. The test may be wrong if too much time has passed by the time of the study, but the presence of this gas in the blood has not been confirmed in any person with the sleeping sickness. And so the doctors decided on the following diagnosis: encephalopathy of unknown origin. A similar ailment of the brain is already known to science: lethargic encephalitis. Patients suffering from it experience weakness in the muscles, hallucination, and fall asleep for several days at a time. What provokes this disease is still unknown. A rare disease of unknown origin is not at all the answer scientists hope to find, so they continue to look, encountering something else interesting. The only animal affected by the sleeping sickness was the cat, Marquis. If the reason was in the air, other animals would also fall asleep. But that didn't happen. What do all the inhabitants of Kalachi have in common except for air? Soil and water. It turned out that all the villagers get water from the same source. One of the residents drilled a well and began to sell water to the others, but the animals were not given purchased water. This situation may seem strange to you, but such are the realities of life in a remote Kazakh village. Chemical waste became a new explanation of the origin of sleeping sickness. In the abandoned mine, or perhaps in the nearby fields, there may be a burial place for such substances. The military or industrialists who buried them half a century ago thought little of the consequences. The chemical waste was disposed of in conventional barrels and left there. Over the years, the barrels could crack, causing the contents to seep into the soil, and from there into the groundwater. Additionally, the symptoms of chemical intoxication of the body are very similar to the sleeping sickness. Some sources even mention that such chemicals begin to actively break down at temperatures of 1 degree Celsius and below, and the sleeping sickness had intensified in the village during winter and weakened in the summer. However, this theory has not yet been tested. First off, the last case of the disease was recorded back in 2015. It's possible that for 3 years, when sleeping sickness terrorized the village, all the chemical waste flowed out of damaged barrels. Second, it's impossible to just go into a uranium mine and check whether there is a waste disposal there. The site is in disrepair and flooded with groundwater. Thus, it's too dangerous to send people there. It's for this reason that researchers and engineers began to design a special drone. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic began, and the research on sleeping sickness was suspended. Meanwhile, life in the village of Kalachi continues to go on as usual. True, there are no longer groups of scientists and journalists, and there are also significantly fewer residents. During the active period of the disease, the government facilitated voluntary resettlement. Residents were asked to move out of the dangerous area. About 100 people agreed, but more than 400 villagers refused to leave the houses in which they had lived all their lives. They didn't like the idea, and probably most of them don't care if the cause of sleeping sickness is ever found. Just curious at best. What do you think? Will scientists ever solve this mystery? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us what you think about Kazakhstan's Sleepy Hollow.